What's going on, guys? Today I thought I'd give you a video about PC gaming and why PC gaming is so good. And I'm going to give you the cons, of course. I'm going to give you the pros and the cons, but there's so many pros that they outweigh the cons. So if you're a gamer and you want to expand your horizons, then tune in, because this is going to be quite an extensive video about PC gaming and why every gamer should have one. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, so let's start off by talking about the cons of PC gaming. And there's some pretty bad cons, but like I said, the pros outweigh the cons. So the thing about PC gaming is it evolves a lot, and sometimes not in a good way. Operating systems change, games aren't compatible anymore, you have to go through a lot of BS just to get a game to work sometimes. Sometimes when you buy a game and you haven't updated your drivers, you have to go update them, or sometimes you have to revert to an older driver to get a game to work. Or work better. For example, I was playing Lord of the Rings War in the North, and it was running like absolute dog shit on the newest AMD drivers, but when I rolled back to an earlier driver, it ran flawlessly. So sometimes I have to keep backups of different drivers just so I can play certain games. So there's a lot of loopholes you have to go through sometimes, but that's just one thing. Another thing is, it's hard to find out, how to maintain your PC sometimes. Like, keeping junk off of it and everything to make it run smoother. It's kind of a weekly maintenance kind of thing, because you have to just constantly keep it up to date and well organized and everything to make it run smoother. And there's just so many things you have to kind of educate yourself about. But that's kind of a good thing as well, because you want to educate yourself about your hobby, but man, it can get really complicated quickly. And it can get frustrating quickly, especially when you just want to play a game. And I think that's why console games will never go away, because the easiness of consoles. You plug it in and you play. There's no BS to go through. But for, if you want to go the best route, get the best quality and everything, you have to pay for the price. And sometimes that's learning about this crap and adapting to it. And it's not easy to do sometimes. It's very frustrating. So while the learning curve may be quite steep, it's still worth it in the end. So let's talk about the pros, and there's quite a bit. Alright, first off, I just want to begin by saying I'm not a biased gamer. I have played console games since 1985. Yeah, I'm an old fart. I started with the Commodore 64 and the Atari 2600, then went up to the NES, SNES, N64. I was mainly a Nintendo guy. I was a Nintendo fan for most of my childhood. I never owned a Sega Genesis or a PlayStation. I just kept going with Nintendo. But when Xbox came out, that was my first. I had the Dreamcast before that, so I had the Dreamcast and then the Xbox, and then the Wii, the Wii U, and Xbox 360. After the 360, I never got another console, and I don't think I will. Well, for Nintendo I will, but just because I have such a soft spot in my heart for them and their software and their hardware. But the PC has pretty much replaced consoles for me, most of them anyway. Like I said, Nintendo, you can't get their games anywhere else. But Microsoft is going where, they're putting some of their exclusives, some of their big hitters on there, not Halo yet. They got Gears coming on there. I'm not sure about Gears 4, but Quantum Break came out on there, and Tomb Raider was a timed exclusive. So everything's coming to the PC. Well, most things coming to the PC. So of course you still don't have Uncharted and stuff like that. So yeah, you are going to need consoles for certain games, but for most of your gaming needs, your PC can pretty much handle anything. Now, investing in a good PC is very important. Doing your research, getting a good processor, getting a good graphics card, all that good stuff, getting enough RAM. I'm not really that, well-versed in PC stuff. I'm still learning as I go, but I've learned quite a bit throughout the years, and I'm gonna show you some of the things that make PC gaming so wonderful. Alright, guys. The first thing that I love about PC gaming is emulation. Now, since I told you I was an old-school gamer with the NES, SNES, and all that, you can play any game from those eras, on their PC with enhanced graphics options and controller options, whatever you want to play with, pretty much. And that's just fantastic. I mean, I'm going to show you a clip here, just a Super Mario World, and I'm going to show you just how colorful it looks and everything. Of course, you could still play on the original hardware, and it won't look this good, but you can still play. They actually sell controllers that mimic the actual controller feel and everything. So if you don't feel like you want to play with an Xbox 360 controller, which is what I pretty much use universally for all these systems, then you can actually invest in controllers such as this. As you can see, this is a NES controller. Here's a Super Nintendo controller. I mean, N60, they got it all. I mean, PC gaming is pretty much very, very flexible. Like, if you want something, you can find it. In addition to having emulation, you can take the keyboard and mouse. Now, okay, let's have a long discussion about the keyboard and mouse, because I was so anti keyboard and mouse when I first got my PC. I was playing Killing Floor with a controller for 1,800 hours. I mapped it to the controller. I did the settings, everything I wanted, and I got to a feel where I was very comfortable, and I was really, really performing well. And people didn't believe I was using a controller, but I did, and it was very enjoyable. But certain games came along, like this game called Depth, where you play as a team of sharks and divers going up against each other. It's a PvP team-based game, and I was getting wrecked, absolutely wrecked. And I was like, man, I can't get any kills. I can't get anything going on here. No assists and nothing. I'm shooting. I can't aim fast enough. And so I was pretty much forced to adapt to using a keyboard and mouse. But I still didn't like it. I didn't like reaching for the key, like the number keys at the top of the board. I couldn't do it. I could. That was my biggest Achilles heel, is I couldn't reach the numbers. And if you've been playing on the PC, you know you got to reach the numbers. So what did I do? I had to go out and get a mouse where I had the numbers on the side of the mouse, where I could just hit them with my thumb. When I did that, oh man, it was all so good, because the one thing that I hated about the keyboard and mouse, I didn't have to worry about it anymore, because I could map everything to the keys on the side. I'll show you a picture of my mouse right here. It's kind of like called an MMO mouse or something, where you have like the 12 keys on the side, but you can map them to whatever you want. And I had 2 on the top here, which I'll use quite frequently for like melee buttons and middle mouse, because I hate the middle mouse click. It's one of the most frustrating things I've seen on the mouse. I don't see how anybody can middle click the mouse without scrolling the wheel. It's so frustrating, and I alleviated that by putting it on one of the top buttons here. So then once I'd done that, I had discovered that the first-person shooters became a lot easier for me. I was going back and playing Call of Duty World at War, and I was like, man, this was a hard game on the 360. I destroyed it on the mouse and keyboard. I mean, I went through the game on the hardest difficulty, and it was so easy. I was like, is this the same game? Is this the same difficulty? And sure enough, it was. And it was because of the precision of the mouse. You could always get headshots. You could always shoot where you wanted to. You could switch weapons quickly. You wouldn't have to do a weapon wheel or anything. You could just hit a button, and there you go. You got your weapon. So many things started to open up for me when I started using the keyboard and mouse. And then when Killing Floor 2 came out, I said, okay, I'm going to try to use the keyboard and mouse. But I still would sometimes go back to the controller, because when you've been using a controller for so many years, it's hard to just throw it away and say, okay, I'm going to use the keyboard and mouse exclusively. It's not that easy. It's kind of like quitting smoking, although I've never smoked. I'm sure it's hard. Any addiction is hard to get through. So I guess you got to say, I was going through a phase where I was still in love with the controller, but I was trying to get rid of it. I was trying to let it go. And I have got to that point now, but it took a long time, a couple years to get to that feel where I said, okay, I don't need the controller anymore. But I still have to use the controller for certain games, like third-person shooters. Driving games, button mashing, hack and slash games. Stuff like that, like Shadow Mortar. I'm not going to use a keyboard and mouse for that. Only thing you would use to aim is the arrow, and that's good enough with the controller. But for fast first-person shooters, I'm always going to use the keyboard and mouse from now on. But it took me a while to get there. Alright, so what's the next step? The price. Games on the PC are much cheaper. A lot cheaper than what you would get on the console. You get sales on Steam, Green Man Gaming, all these things. You get so many games for cheap. I'm going to show you a list here of all the games I have on Steam, and I have some that I'm sharing with my friend, and that's another thing you can do, is you can share games on Steam Well, there are some exceptions. Ubisoft doesn't let you do it. They have this DRM bullshit that doesn't allow it. And I think Resident Evil is doing it now with their remake of Resident Evil Zero. You can't share that either. But for most of them, like for example, I let my friend play the new Doom here, and let him try it out. You know, and it's cool because you don't have to pay for any. It's like a free rental service, and you can play it as long as the guy's not on the account. And since I have a work schedule, I could just tell him, okay, I'm off these. I mean, we're working these days. You can get on whenever you want while I'm at work and play freely. So that's another advantage you have with PC gaming. But probably the best thing about PC gaming is the modding. And there's this thing about modding where if you buy a product in the past, if you bought a product in the past, that was what you got. You couldn't extend the life of it. You couldn't add anything to it, but now you can. I'm going to give you an example here. The best game of all time, in my opinion, was Final Fantasy VI. Well, 3/6. It was 3 in the Super Nintendo, but it was 6 in Japan, so it's officially 6. So it came out on Steam, but it came out as a mobile port, and it was terrible. The controls were terrible. The sprites looked awful. They looked cel-shaded, and they just didn't look like the Super Nintendo did. So I was like, man, this is a terrible... But I looked at the ratings, and they were very positive. So I was like, okay, I'm going to buy it because it's the best game of all time. And then I quickly found out there's a modding community that is quickly making this game the definitive version. They're going in and making the sprites just like the Super Nintendo sprites were. They're changing the graphical fidelity of the game. It's just so many things about PCs that you can do. I mean, I didn't like the controller with the key. This is one game I didn't like the controller using the keyboard and mouse for the controls because it was absolutely wrecked. It was terrible. So I used Xpadder, and Xpadder is what I've been using for a lot of PC games that don't have controller support. And for this game, I have to use the controller because the mouse and keyboard is pretty much useless in a game like Final Fantasy where it's turn-based. So, yeah, that's another thing. And to close out this video, there's also mods for not only, games that are coming out now, but there's mods that exist for games like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye, for the N64, where they have made it to where you can play with the keyboard and mouse. I showed you some footage of that in my last video with Perfect Dark when I was playing it with the keyboard and mouse. That's why I was able to get so many easy headshots, because the precision is just so good. That's just something else that you can do with a PC. I mean, the limitations are pretty much endless, and it all comes down to imagination and what people can come up with. I mean, it's only going to get better, and who knows, maybe you can make the next great mod. I mean, who knows? And with Cal Anderson and Danny Jugan making football games on the PC, customizable options are going through the roof. I mean, you'll have options if you don't want to play Madden anymore. Well, hey, that's another reason to get a PC. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative, and I'll see you guys next time.